Hey guys! So, Wunderwaffe is the official term used to refer to some of the latest developments in the German military industry. The nation's best minds were designing long-range rockets, jet planes, and huge tanks with impenetrable armor. Some ambitious products saw the light of day early in the war, such as the 800mm monstrous cannons Dora and Schwerer Gustav, or small-scale projects, for example, the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter, which was a breakthrough for its time. These examples were even used in combat. Some designs were made in a single copy, confirming the theories, while others went down in history as insane, cutting-edge projects. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you about some of the interesting and crazy developments of the Third Reich that you might have never even heard of. As the prolonged war began to worry the population and the military, the ministry propaganda constantly mentioned these wonders of German science to boost morale. However, in reality, creating such weapons required years of design and testing. Nevertheless, the Nazis used many innovations to develop their latest armaments. If everything had worked for them, it's quite possible that the fascist leadership could have deployed such weapons in combat, and the Axis powers might have won the war or, at the very least, preserved some of the conquered territories. After all, it was in 1938 Germany that physicists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered the process of nuclear fission. Third Reich physicists diligently worked on developing nuclear weapons and created an entire series of experimental reactors. Fortunately for the Allies, Germany did not manage to create nuclear weapons and couldn't fund the development of other wonder weapons to a sufficient extent. Messerschmitt Me 323 Gigant. Messerschmitt created the largest object to take to the skies during World War II. A total of 200 Gigant aircraft were produced, which completed around 2,000 flights. Each of them could carry 120 paratroopers and a massive amount of ammunition. The payload of each aircraft was 23 tons. Unlike other devices, the Me 323 was actively used for military purposes. Although over 80 of these planes were shot down during the war, which is, by the way, 40% of the total number, they were generally robust aircraft. They introduced innovations such as multi-wheeled landing gear, a front cargo hatch, and a wide fuselage. Similar technical solutions are used in modern cargo planes. Ruhrstahl X4. What could be better than a weapon that tears aircraft apart using tornadoes? How about a guided missile that, while not as epic, is significantly more realistic and deadly than a tornado? The Ruhrstahl X4, also known as the Kramer X4, was an air-to-air guided missile. It could recognize and home in on the engine vibrations of a heavy bomber, and the missile could also be controlled by the pilot who launched it. By the end of 1944, more than 1,000 of these missiles were planned for production, but during a bombing raid, the BMW factory producing engines for the X4 was destroyed. Thus, the Ruhrstahl X4 never made it into Luftwaffe's surface. Imagine if the Nazis had managed to mount these missiles on their jet bombers, which Allied fighters couldn't catch up with. The technology implemented by the Germans in this missile is used in modern guided missiles for aerial target destruction. So if the Germans had this weapon, they might have regained air superiority. Sea Lion. Subterranean submarine by engineer von Werner. Engineer Horner von Werner patented his design named Sea Lion back in 1933. His submarine was supposed to first travel underwater to stealthily reach enemy shores, and then tunnel underground to plant bombs beneath enemy military targets, or deploy special forces. The project lay dormant for 10 years. However, with the outbreak of war, the Nazis started considering all interesting ideas for new weapons. And this is how Sea Lion made its way onto the agenda. Technical specifications: length 25 meters, crew 5 people plus 10 paratroopers, speed underground 7 kilometers an hour, warhead 300 kilograms of explosives. In 1943, Hitler was presented with the idea of using sea lions for infiltrating British territory. However, German military production was already working at its limits, and developing yet another superweapon was beyond their capacity. After the war, the Soviet Union got their hands on the blueprints for the Sea Lion, which the Soviet engineer Trebelev used to construct the subterranean vehicle. This vehicle was actually created and tested somewhere in the Urals in the post-war years. Project Seetofel, a submarine on caterpillar tracks. According to the engineer's concept, the Seetofel was supposed to independently descend into the water anywhere in the sea, and, when necessary, come ashore when the target was on land and it was necessary to discreetly land troops on the shore. The crew consisted of 2 people, and the speed was supposed to reach 10 nautical miles per hour in the water and up to 25 kilometers per hour on land. The project failed. The submarine, built as a single prototype by 1944, couldn't pass the test trials. The 14-meter cigar-shaped submarine got stuck in the sand, as its short caterpillar tracks and weak diesel engine couldn't handle the terrain. Its speed was lower than planned, only 10 kilometers an hour on land and about 8 knots at sea. Vengeance Weapon V3. Most people have heard about the German rockets V1 and V2. The first was a rocket-propelled aircraft, while the second was the world's first ballistic missile. These rockets were used during the war, but their impact was minimal from a military strategic perspective. However, the V-rockets posed significant problems for the residents of London, who often found themselves as the target. But there was a more original vengeance weapon project, V3. Despite their similar names, the latter had little in common with V1 and V2. It was a massive multi-chamber gun, also known as the high-pressure pump or centipede, due to the numerous chambers protruding along the sides of the barrel, which somewhat resembled legs when viewed from the top. The project was developed under the guidance of designer August Conders. The length of the gun was 130 meters, consisting of 32 sections, each of which had charge chambers on the sides. The gun was supposed to use special arrow-shaped projectiles, 3.2 meters long. The maximum firing range was 165 kilometers, but the explosive charge weight was no more than 25 kilograms. At the same time, the gun could fire at a rate of 1 shot per minute, which would allow a battery of such guns to literally rain shells on London. Positions for such guns were planned to be set up near the English Channel coast. They were just 95 miles from the British capital, and the destruction of London could have been substantial. Despite the guns being located in special protective tunnels, they were completely destroyed during an air raid on July 6, 1944. As a result, the original V3 never participated in the war. However, its shortened version, the LRK-15F58, had better luck. It was used twice to shell Luxembourg in the winter of 1944 to 1945. The maximum firing range for this artillery system was 50 kilometers, and the weight of the arrow-shaped projectile was 97 kilograms. Artificial Tornado Vortex Cannon. At that time, all major powers vying for global dominance, including the USSR, the USA, and Germany, were researching ways to influence weather and climate. The Nazis aimed to use hurricanes to bring down enemy bombers. It's unknown how close or far they were from implementing this project, but as previous examples in this video show, if they had time and even a slim chance of success, they wouldn't have been stopped. Hitler's Flying Saucers. Even today, one can find hundreds of pictures and descriptions online of Hitler's fantastical flying saucers. In reality, there were only 2 such saucers. The aircraft that looked like a UFO was designed by engineer Henry Fock and presented in 1939. It was an aircraft capable of vertical takeoff. The main lifting structure was a large disc-shaped wing. Several models were built by the end of the war, and development continued almost until the end of the war with the support of the Luftwaffe. However, a full-scale prototype was never created. Nazi Germany's Space Station. This sounds like more of something out of a modern comic book villain's plot than a real project. However, the leadership of Nazi Germany seriously discussed it. Of course, it was clear that this was an extremely costly program, so they allocated 50 years for its implementation. Naturally, it was assumed that Germany would win World War II, and then they would need a powerful weapon to keep the world in fear. What could be scarier than a punishing beam of fire striking the Defiant straight from the sky? That was precisely the plan. They aimed to build a space orbital station with a massive mirror covering an area of 3 square kilometers. It was supposed to reflect the sun's rays onto a specific point on Earth's surface. According to calculations, the energy of such a beam would be sufficient to melt even armored vehicles in the designated area. All of this certainly sounds like science fiction, but during the wartime years, Nazi Germany had all the prerequisites for the rapid development of the space industry in the subsequent years. The fact that they had rockets like the V-2 entering space was a reality. There's even an unproven theory that the first astronaut wasn't Yuri Gagarin, but a German test pilot who conducted a suborbital spaceflight on a V-10 rocket, although he perished in the process. In other words, if the Germans had won the war, a few decades would have been enough for them to develop rocket carriers capable of placing payloads into Earth's orbit and create an orbital station. As for the enormous mirror sending deadly solar beams to Earth, it's hard to say how feasible that project was. One thing is certain. If the mega mirror failed, they would have come up with something equally as deadly. Perhaps it would have been a powerful laser or some kind of Engineer Gagarin's hyperboloid. Naturally, this project never went beyond the idea stage of development. Die Glocke. Work on Die Glocke, which translates from German as the bell, began in 1940. It was overseen by SS group leader Hans Kammler from the SS Brain Center at the Skoda factory in Pilsen. The initial testing of this wonder weapon took place in the vicinity of Breslau. However, in December 1944, a group of scientists was relocated to an underground laboratory inside the Wenceslas mine. Die Glocke is described in documents as a massive bell made of solid metal, about 3 meters wide and approximately 4.5 meters tall. The device contained 2 lead cylinders rotating in opposite directions and filled with an unknown substance codenamed Zerum 525. When Die Glocke was activated, it illuminated the shaft with a pale purple light. When this weapon was fired, the mechanism of its use is unknown. It created a zone of influence with a radius of 200 meters. Within this zone, the radiation from Die Glocke caused power outages in a 2-kilometer radius, and test animals died. The bodies of rats and rabbits had crystals in them, and their blood coagulated. Plants lost their chlorophyll, turned white, and decomposed within 8 to 10 hours. Now, the main source for this claim is the Polish journalist Igor Witowski, author of the notorious book The Truth About the Wunderwaffe. He references documents from the archives of several countries to support his claims. This includes the interrogation protocols of SS group leader Jacob Sporenberg in Poland, statements made to the Americans by the captured director of Skoda, Wilhelm Voss, and files from the Argentine Ministry of Defense, declassified in 1993. The only possible evidence of the project's existence is the ruins of arches called the Henge, found 3 kilometers from the wartime factory. Perhaps it was a special device for conducting laboratory tests of the weapon. To this day, there is no definitive evidence that this project was actually developed by German scientists. Nevertheless, many developments of the Wunderwaffe served as the foundation for advanced weaponry created by developed nations after World War II. Well, that's all for today, friends. Like this video if you found it interesting, make fun of my horrible German pronunciations in the comments, and we'll see you next time.